Hello everyone. In the sun-drenched landscape of ancient Greece, few figures have cast as long a shadow as Pythagoras of Samos. Born around 570 BCE on the Aegean island of Samos, Pythagoras would grow to become one of the most influential thinkers in Western history, a mathematician, mystic, and philosopher whose ideas about freedom would reverberate through millennia of human thought. When we speak of freedom today, we often think of political liberties or personal autonomy. Yet for Pythagoras, freedom was something far more profound, a state of harmony with the cosmos achieved through mathematical understanding, ethical discipline, and spiritual insight. His conception of freedom was not merely about the absence of external constraints, but about achieving an inner liberation that aligned the individual with universal order. "No one is free who has not obtained the empire of himself," Pythagoras reportedly declared, capturing the essence of his philosophy in a single statement. For him, true freedom began with self-mastery and extended outward to embrace cosmic harmony. The Pythagorean approach to freedom was revolutionary for its time. While his contemporaries might have viewed freedom primarily in political terms, as the difference between citizen and slave, Pythagoras developed a multidimensional understanding that encompassed the mathematical, the ethical, and the spiritual. His community at Croton in southern Italy became a laboratory for this philosophy, a place where men and women alike could pursue liberation through knowledge and discipline. This article explores the rich tapestry of Pythagorean thought on freedom, examining how his mathematical discoveries informed his understanding of liberation, how his community structure reflected his ideals, and how his ethical teachings provided a pathway to freedom. We will also trace the influence of these ideas through history, showing how Pythagorean concepts of freedom shaped later philosophical traditions from Plato to the present day. As we journey through the world of Pythagorean freedom, we will discover a philosophy that remains surprisingly relevant to our modern quest for meaning and liberation, a philosophy that suggests true freedom comes not from doing whatever we desire, but from aligning ourselves with the deeper harmonies that govern both our inner lives and the cosmos itself. The life and times of Pythagoras, historical context. Pythagoras of Samos, early life and influences. Born on the island of Samos around 570 BC, Pythagoras of Samos emerged during a period of extraordinary intellectual ferment in the ancient world. This era, often called the Axial Age, saw the rise of transformative thinkers across civilizations, Confucius in China, Buddha in India, and the pre-Socratic philosophers in Greece. Pythagoras would take his place among these revolutionary minds, developing a unique approach to understanding reality and human freedom. The young Pythagoras grew up under the tyranny of Polycrates, whose oppressive rule may have shaped the philosopher's later ideas about freedom and governance. Historical accounts suggest that Pythagoras left Samos partly to escape this political environment, embarking on extensive travels that would profoundly influence his philosophical development. These journeys took him to Egypt, Babylon, and possibly as far as India, exposing him to diverse intellectual traditions. In Egypt, he likely studied with priests, absorbing their mathematical knowledge and religious practices. In Babylon, he encountered advanced astronomical observations and possibly the mathematical innovations of Mesopotamian culture. These experiences provided Pythagoras with a cosmopolitan education rare for his time, allowing him to synthesize various traditions into his distinctive philosophical system. The teachings of Pythagoras of Samos combined mathematical precision with spiritual insight. His exposure to different cultures and knowledge systems enabled him to develop a philosophy that transcended the limitations of any single tradition, creating a comprehensive approach to understanding both the cosmos and human freedom within it. The founding of the Pythagorean school. Around 530 BCE, Pythagoras settled in Croton, a Greek colony in southern Italy. There he established his famous school, a community that was simultaneously a philosophical academy, a religious brotherhood, and a political association. This institution would become the laboratory for his ideas about freedom, both personal and collective. The Pythagorean community represented a radical departure from conventional Greek social structures. Most notably, it admitted women as full members, an extraordinary innovation in a society where women were typically excluded from public and intellectual life. This inclusion suggests that Pythagoras viewed the capacity for philosophical understanding and freedom as transcending gender boundaries. The school operated according to a hierarchical structure that reflected Pythagorean beliefs about the journey toward freedom. New members, called akosmatikoi listeners, observed a 5-year period of silence, during which they listened to Pythagoras' teachings from behind a veil, never seeing the master himself. This practice was designed to develop the discipline of receptive listening and to free the mind from the habit of hasty judgment. After this initial period, successful initiates could progress to become mathematikoi learners who received direct instruction in mathematics, music, astronomy, and philosophy. This inner circle participated in the community's most sacred rituals and had access to the esoteric aspects of Pythagorean teaching. The community practiced a communal lifestyle, with members sharing possessions and adhering to a strict daily regimen. This arrangement was not merely practical but philosophical. It embodied the Pythagorean belief that freedom comes through harmony with others and with cosmic order, rather than through individualistic pursuit of desires. Political context and persecution. The Pythagorean community existed within a complex political landscape. Greek colonies in southern Italy were experiencing tensions between aristocratic and democratic factions, and the Pythagoreans' emphasis on order, harmony, and hierarchy often aligned them with aristocratic interests. This political positioning would eventually lead to violent opposition. Around 510 BCE, democratic uprisings in Croton targeted the Pythagorean community. Many members were killed, and their meeting houses were burned. Pythagoras himself may have perished in this violence, though accounts vary. This persecution scattered the Pythagoreans throughout the Greek world, inadvertently spreading their ideas more widely. The political backlash against the Pythagoreans highlights a tension within their philosophy of freedom. While they sought liberation through mathematical understanding and ethical discipline, their community structure and political affiliations sometimes appeared to support social hierarchies that limited the freedom of others. This paradox between inner liberation and social constraint would remain a challenging aspect of the Pythagorean legacy. Despite this violent disruption, Pythagorean ideas survived through disciples who established new communities and through writings that preserved the master's teachings. The persecution may have even strengthened the resolve of followers to maintain their distinctive approach to freedom through mathematical harmony and ethical discipline. Mathematical principles and the foundations of freedom. All is number, the mathematical basis of reality. The cornerstone of Pythagorean philosophy rests on the revolutionary insight that all is number. This principle represents far more than a mathematical observation. It constitutes a profound statement about the nature of reality and, by extension, about the path to freedom. For Pythagoras, numbers were not merely human constructs or tools for calculation, but the fundamental reality underlying all phenomena. The core of Pythagorean philosophy rests on the belief that mathematics reveals universal truths about freedom. By understanding numerical relationships, one could grasp the essential structure of the cosmos and thereby free oneself from the illusions of sensory perception. This mathematical worldview emerged partly from Pythagoras' famous discovery of the relationship between musical harmonies and numerical ratios. When he observed that pleasing musical intervals corresponded to simple numerical ratios, such as 2:1 for the octave or 3:2 for the perfect fifth, Pythagoras recognized a profound connection between mathematics and sensory experience. This discovery suggested that mathematical principles govern not just abstract calculations, but the very phenomena that humans find beautiful and harmonious. The Pythagoreans extended this insight to all aspects of reality. They associated numbers with qualities and concepts. 1 represented reason, 2 represented opinion, 3 justice, and 4 the earth. This practice of number symbolism was not mere superstition, but reflected their belief that numerical relationships revealed deeper truths about reality. For the Pythagoreans, this mathematical understanding offered a path to freedom. By perceiving the numerical patterns underlying apparent chaos, the philosopher could free themselves from confusion and illusion. Knowledge of mathematical truth provided liberation from the tyranny of appearances and the limitations of conventional thinking. Many scholars consider Pythagoras a philosopher who bridged the gap between mysticism and rational thought. His mathematical approach to reality combined rigorous reasoning with spiritual insight, creating a unique path to freedom through understanding the numerical structure of the cosmos. The Pythagorean theorem, a model of liberation. Perhaps no mathematical discovery is more closely associated with Pythagoras than the theorem bearing his name, which states that in a right-angled triangle, the square of the hypotenuse equals the sum of the squares of the other two sides, a superscript 2 plus b superscript 2 equals c superscript 2. While historians debate whether Pythagoras himself discovered this principle, it perfectly exemplifies the Pythagorean approach to freedom through mathematical understanding. The Pythagorean theorem demonstrates how abstract mathematical reasoning can reveal hidden truths about physical reality. A relationship that is not immediately obvious to sensory perception becomes clear through mathematical analysis. This process of discovery models the Pythagorean path to freedom, moving from the limitations of ordinary perception to the clarity of mathematical insight. Moreover, the theorem reveals a harmony between seemingly different geometric forms, squares and triangles, suggesting a deeper unity underlying apparent diversity. This mathematical harmony served as a model for the Pythagorean understanding of cosmic order and human freedom within it. The theorem also illustrates the Pythagorean belief in the power of rational inquiry to transcend cultural and historical boundaries. Unlike cultural practices or political arrangements, which vary across societies, mathematical truths, like the Pythagorean theorem, remain valid regardless of time or place. This universality suggested to the Pythagoreans that mathematical understanding offered access to eternal truths, a form of intellectual freedom that transcended the limitations of particular societies or historical moments. For Pythagoreans, mastering such mathematical principles was not merely an intellectual exercise, but a spiritual practice. By understanding the theorem, one participated in the divine order of the cosmos, achieving a form of liberation through knowledge. The clarity and certainty of mathematical demonstration provided a model for freedom from confusion, doubt, and error. The harmony of the spheres, cosmic order, and human freedom. Among the most influential Pythagorean concepts was the harmony of the spheres, the idea that celestial bodies move according to mathematical principles, creating a cosmic music inaudible to human ears. This concept represents the Pythagorean vision of cosmic order and its relationship to human freedom. According to this doctrine, the planets and stars move in circular orbits at distances corresponding to musical intervals. Their movement produces sounds, a celestial music that reflects perfect mathematical harmony. Humans cannot hear this music because we have been immersed in it since birth, but the philosopher who understands its mathematical basis can comprehend the harmony intellectually. This concept illustrates the Pythagorean belief that the cosmos operates according to mathematical principles that create harmony rather than chaos. For Pythagoreans, true freedom came not from opposing this cosmic order, but from understanding it and aligning oneself with it. As Pythagoras reportedly stated, there is geometry in the humming of the strings, there is music in the spacing of the spheres. The harmony of the spheres also suggests that apparent opposites, such as freedom and necessity, can be reconciled through mathematical understanding. The celestial bodies follow necessary mathematical laws, yet this necessity creates beautiful harmony rather than constraint. Similarly, human freedom comes not from escaping natural laws, but from understanding them and living in harmony with them. This cosmic vision had profound implications for the Pythagorean understanding of human freedom. It suggested that freedom is not the absence of order, but participation in a higher order. Just as the planets achieve harmony by following mathematical principles, humans achieve freedom by aligning their lives with the mathematical order of the cosmos. The influence of Pythagorean philosophy on later thinkers shaped Western concepts of freedom for centuries. From Plato's cosmic vision to Renaissance cosmology to Enlightenment concepts of natural law, the Pythagorean idea that freedom comes through understanding and alignment with mathematical order has remained a powerful current in Western thought. The Pythagorean community, a laboratory for freedom, communal structure, and shared resources. The Pythagorean community at Croton represented a radical social experiment, an attempt to create a way of life that embodied philosophical principles and facilitated the pursuit of freedom through knowledge and discipline. This community structure provides crucial insights into how Pythagoreans understood freedom in practice rather than merely in theory. Central to the community was the principle of shared resources. Upon joining, members would contribute their property to the collective, creating a common fund that supported all. This practice reflected the Pythagorean belief that attachment to personal possessions limited freedom by binding individuals to material concerns. By sharing resources, members could free themselves from such attachments and focus on philosophical development. The Pythagorean community practiced a form of communal living that balanced individual development with collective harmony. Daily life followed a structured routine that included mathematical study, physical exercise, musical practice, and communal meals. This regimen was designed to develop all aspects of the person, intellectual, physical, and spiritual, in a balanced way that promoted freedom through self-mastery. Communal meals held special significance in Pythagorean life. These were not merely occasions for nourishment, but opportunities for philosophical discussion and the reinforcement of community bonds. The famous Pythagorean dietary restrictions, including vegetarianism and the prohibition of beans, were observed at these meals. These practices reflected ethical principles about respect for living beings and beliefs about spiritual purity that were integral to the Pythagorean path to freedom. The community structure also embodied the Pythagorean concept of friendship as a path to freedom. Pythagoras reportedly defined friendship as one soul residing in two bodies, suggesting that true friendship creates a harmony between individuals similar to mathematical harmony. Through such relationships, Pythagoreans believed they could overcome the limitations of individual perspective and achieve a more comprehensive understanding of truth. This communal approach to freedom challenges modern individualistic conceptions. For Pythagoreans, freedom was not achieved by maximizing individual choice or minimizing external constraints, but by creating harmonious relationships within a community dedicated to shared philosophical goals. The structure of their community reflected their belief that freedom comes through harmony rather than through isolation or independence. Gender equality and intellectual freedom. One of the most revolutionary aspects of the Pythagorean community was its inclusion of women as philosophical equals, an extraordinary departure from Greek social norms that typically excluded women from intellectual and public life. This practice reflects a distinctive Pythagorean understanding of freedom that transcended conventional gender boundaries. Historical accounts mention several prominent female Pythagoreans, including Theano, who may have been Pythagoras' wife and who reportedly led the school after his death, Maia, Arignote, and Damo. These women participated fully in the community's philosophical activities and contributed to its intellectual development. Some ancient sources attribute philosophical writings to these women, though few such texts have survived. The inclusion of women suggests that Pythagoreans viewed the capacity for philosophical understanding and freedom as universal rather than gender-specific. This perspective contrasted sharply with prevailing Greek attitudes, which often associated rationality and philosophical capacity primarily with men. By opening philosophical education to women, Pythagoreans implicitly challenged these gender-based limitations on intellectual freedom. This gender inclusivity aligned with the broader Pythagorean belief that freedom comes through knowledge rather than through social status or identity. If mathematical truth is universal, then the ability to understand it and achieve freedom through that understanding must also be universal. The community's structure thus embodied its philosophical principle that true freedom transcends social categories. However, it's important to note that while the Pythagorean community was revolutionary in including women, it maintained other hierarchical elements. The distinction between akosmatikoi and mathematikoi created an intellectual hierarchy within the community. This tension between egalitarian and hierarchical elements reflects the complex Pythagorean understanding of freedom as requiring both universal access to knowledge and a structured path of development. The Pythagorean inclusion of women had lasting influence on later philosophical traditions, particularly Platonism, which maintained a more open attitude toward female philosophical capacity than many other ancient schools. This aspect of the Pythagorean legacy represents an early recognition that intellectual freedom should not be constrained by gender, a principle that would be repeatedly forgotten and rediscovered throughout Western history. Silence, secrecy, and the path to inner freedom. Among the most distinctive Pythagorean practices was the discipline of silence, ecomythia, imposed on new members. For up to 5 years, initiates were required to remain silent during philosophical discussions, listening carefully to teachings without offering their own opinions. This practice reveals much about the Pythagorean understanding of the path to freedom. The discipline of silence served multiple purposes. First, it developed the capacity for receptive listening, the ability to absorb teachings fully before formulating responses. This practice countered the Greek tendency toward rapid debate and verbal display, which Pythagoreans may have seen as obstacles to deeper understanding. By learning to listen before speaking, initiates freed themselves from habitual patterns of thought and reaction. Second, the practice of silence cultivated patience and self-restraint, qualities the Pythagoreans considered essential for freedom. As Pythagoras reportedly advised, "Be silent, or let thy words be worth more than silence." This teaching suggests that true freedom includes freedom from compulsive speech and hasty judgment, the ability to remain silent until one has something valuable to contribute. The Pythagorean community also maintained practices of secrecy regarding certain teachings, particularly mathematical discoveries and religious rituals. This secrecy has sometimes been interpreted as elitist, but it may have served philosophical purposes related to freedom. By treating knowledge as sacred and not immediately accessible, Pythagoreans emphasized that true understanding requires discipline and preparation. Freedom through knowledge was not instantaneous, but required a gradual process of development. The paradox of Pythagorean secrecy is that it aimed to protect knowledge that would ultimately be liberating. The community restricted access to teachings not to permanently withhold them, but to ensure they were received by those prepared to understand them properly. This approach reflects the Pythagorean belief that freedom comes not merely from having information, but from having the capacity to comprehend its deeper significance. The practices of silence and secrecy also created a distinctive psychological environment that facilitated inner transformation. By temporarily limiting external expression, these disciplines directed attention inward, promoting self-examination and the development of inner resources. This inward focus aligned with the Pythagorean view that true freedom begins within, with mastery of one's own thoughts, emotions, and desires. These Pythagorean practices challenge modern assumptions about freedom of expression. While contemporary thought often associates freedom with unlimited self-expression, the Pythagorean approach suggests that such expression can sometimes reflect and reinforce mental habits rather than true freedom. Their practices propose that certain limitations on expression can paradoxically create conditions for deeper liberation. Personal freedom in Pythagorean philosophy. Self-mastery as the path to liberation. At the heart of Pythagorean ethics lies the principle that true freedom begins with self-mastery. This concept is captured in the famous Pythagorean maxim, "No one is free who has not obtained the empire of himself." This statement encapsulates the Pythagorean understanding that freedom is not primarily about external circumstances, but about internal governance. For Pythagoreans, most humans live in a state of inner tyranny, dominated by unexamined desires, emotions, and habits. This inner disorder creates a form of slavery more fundamental than any external bondage. Even a person free from external constraints remains unfree if ruled by passions, appetites, or unexamined beliefs. True freedom requires establishing governance over these internal forces. The Pythagorean path to self-mastery involved specific disciplines designed to develop this inner governance. These included daily self-examination. Pythagoreans were instructed to review their actions each evening, asking themselves, "What did I do wrong? What did I do right? What did I leave undone?" This practice develops self-awareness and the capacity to evaluate one's own behavior against philosophical principles. Mathematical study. By engaging with mathematical problems, Pythagoreans cultivated mental clarity and discipline. The precision required for mathematical thinking trained the mind to overcome confusion and impulsivity. Musical practice. The study of musical harmony provided a model for establishing harmony within the soul. By understanding how musical notes could be brought into mathematical relationship, Pythagoreans learned principles applicable to bringing their own faculties into proper order. Dietary discipline. Restrictions on food, particularly the avoidance of meat, train practitioners in the governance of basic appetites. By demonstrating mastery over hunger and taste preferences, Pythagoreans developed the capacity to govern stronger passions. These practices reflect the Pythagorean belief that freedom requires training and development rather than mere absence of constraint. Thanks for watching. Please subscribe.